They say the past is written in stone. But what if some of those stones had been deliberately buried? All over the world, under layers of earth and silence, lie discoveries that defy everything we know about human history. Artifacts that do not fit, ruins that should not exist, and technologies that seem impossibly advanced. Every time they come to light, they raise questions that nobody wants answered. And just as quickly, they are discarded, hidden, or forgotten. But tonight, we bring them to light. During the next 2 hours, you will travel through the most forbidden archaeological discoveries ever unearthed. Find a quiet place, close your eyes, and prepare to question everything you have been told. The Great Sphinx of Giza, enigmatic and eternal, stands in silence under the hot Egyptian sun. His face worn by time, looking endlessly east, has seen empires rise and fall, kings crowned and buried, and sandstorms sweep history into oblivion. It is more than just a monument. It is an enigma, not only because of its age or design, but because of the persistent legend that whispers of a secret chamber hidden under its ancient paws. This is not simple marginal speculation or mythical adornment. It is a theory that has endured for decades. A theory that has attracted the attention of rebellious researchers, curious explorers, and even geologists funded by NASA. They all ask the same question. Could there be a hall of records buried beneath the Sphinx? A lost archive of the history of humanity, perhaps even of pre-human history, deliberately hidden from the world. History does not begin in modern science, but with ancient myths. The concept of the Hall of Records is deeply rooted in mystical traditions, especially in the writings of the mystic Edgar Cayce, known as the Sleeping Prophet. Cayce claimed that under the Sphinx was a time capsule, a chamber that housed the ancient knowledge of a lost civilization, possibly Atlantis itself. He spoke of scrolls, artifacts, and devices, vestiges of an advanced culture that was erased from the face of the earth thousands of years ago. Most conventional scholars dismissed Cayce's visions as psychic fantasies. But then something strange happened in the early 1990s. Using ground-penetrating radar, a team of researchers led by Thomas DeBecke and John Anthony West began scanning the bedrock around the Sphinx. What they found would shake any archaeologist with an open mind. Their team detected anomalies, hollow spaces beneath the front paws of the Sphinx and along its sides. These cavities were rectangular, deliberately shaped, and unmistakably artificial. The implications were astonishing. If these chambers existed, they were not natural hollows. They were rooms, sealed rooms, possibly intact for thousands of years. However, the Egyptian authorities were not happy. The team's findings were quietly dismissed. Access to new excavations was restricted. The official response: the Sphinx is solid. There are no chambers. There are no secrets. But the scanners do not lie. Why all the resistance? National pride? Egyptian officials may have feared losing control of their narrative or perhaps revealing truths that challenged the dominant timelines of civilization. Others believe the issue runs deeper, that this chamber contains evidence so revolutionary that it would rewrite not only history books, but everything we think we know about the origin of human beings. And then there's water. One of the most controversial findings related to the Sphinx is not what is underneath, but what marks its surface. The geologist Dr. Robert Schoch observed deep vertical erosion patterns along the walls surrounding the Sphinx. An erosion different from that caused by wind and sand, but caused by water. Torrential rains, to be exact. But Egypt has not seen rains of such intensity in millennia, not since around 10,000 AC. This would mean that the Sphinx is millennia older than Egyptian civilization, challenging the belief that it was built by the pharaoh Khafra around 2500 ACC. It suggests that it may have been built at a time when it was not believed that any known civilization existed, possibly by a lost culture whose legacy was swept away by some global cataclysm. Under this new light, the legend of the Hall of Records no longer seems absurd. It begins to look like a fragment of a forgotten truth. If such a civilization existed, capable of sculpting the Sphinx and building chambers beneath it, what knowledge did they preserve? And who decided to bury it? But if these questions shake the foundations of our understanding, what comes next and threatens to break them completely? In the next part, we delve further into esoteric texts, strange excavations, restricted photos, and government silence. What is really hidden under the Sphinx? And why are we not allowed to see it? In the silence that takes over Giza at sunset, when the tourists retreat and the last light tinges the sand with gold, the Sphinx seems to awaken, silent, vigilant, sinister. Under its paws, where ground-penetrating radar confirmed the presence of anomalous chambers, lies a forbidden question. Why does Egypt not allow anyone to ask publicly? Why have these chambers not been excavated? Over the years, several groups have tried to access them. Independent researchers, American institutions, and even international archaeological teams have requested permits to drill, explore, or simply see what is underneath. But all requests have been denied. The official position of the Supreme Council of Antiquities has remained unchanged. There are no chambers, no archives, no reason to continue investigating. However, this statement contradicts their own data. In 1993, photos and reports emerged from the Egyptian government itself, showing that small excavations had already been carried out secretly. Some claim that there are images hidden in archives showing workers lowering cameras into holes drilled near the Sphinx's base. What did they see? No one knows, but there is more. Stories from former members of the council suggest that there are strange symbols carved on the walls of the chambers. Incomprehensible hieroglyphs, which are neither Egyptian hieroglyphs nor any known writing, tools different from those of the Old Empire, and even artifacts made of materials to which humanity no longer has access. Apparently, these were discreetly removed, cataloged, and buried deeper than the chambers themselves, hidden in bureaucracy and erased from records. It sounds like fantasy, like a conspiracy. However, silence is more eloquent than denial. And here, the trail takes us beyond archaeology into the realm of geopolitics and secret knowledge. Some believe that the United States, through a combination of academic funding and discreet diplomacy, obtained partial access to some of these findings. This theory is framed in a broader narrative, which suggests that there is a coordinated global effort at the highest level to keep the origins of advanced prehistoric civilizations secret. Why? Because the implications are profound. If an advanced society existed before the Egyptians, before the Sumerians, even before the last ice age, that would mean that our entire understanding of human progress is wrong. It would mean that civilizations arose and disappeared long before history began to record them, and that they may have left technologies, philosophies, and knowledge far superior to what we possess today. The library located under the Sphinx, if it exists, is not just a historical archive. It is a possible time capsule about the origin of humanity. It could contain information about forgotten continents, celestial knowledge, spiritual systems, or even technologies that defy our current understanding of physics. There are those who believe that this knowledge is already in the hands of a chosen few, that it has been weaponized, studied, hidden, not because humanity is not ready for it, but because those in power fear losing control of the narrative. And so, the library remains sealed, not by stone, but by silence. Meanwhile, the Sphinx watches eroded, majestic, mysterious, guardian not only of tombs, but of truths. Under its gaze lies one of the greatest archaeological mysteries ever whispered. Is the Hall of Records real? Or is it simply a myth born of longing, the echo of a story too old to be remembered and too dangerous to reveal? Perhaps someday we will know. Or perhaps we know it already and have simply decided to forget it. As a quick note, these videos take a long time to make, so subscribing would greatly motivate us to create more amazing content. Thank you. It was the year 1900. Off the rocky coast of the Greek island of Antiqua, sponge divers, men hardened by sea, salt, and silence, descended into the blue depths of the Mediterranean. The water was dark, thick, and full of sediment and shadows. Below them lay the remains of a shipwreck from the Roman era that rested quietly in its aquatic tomb, untouched for over 2,000 years. Among marble statues, forgotten cargo, and pieces of rotten wood, they found something that did not fit, something that at first no one knew how to identify. A piece of corroded bronze, cast like sea stone and green from centuries of oxidation. It seemed meaningless, useless, just a piece of metal in ruins. And yet, within that misshapen piece, history held its breath. Years would pass before anyone realized what had been discovered. When they took the artifact to the National Archaeological Museum of Athens, its appearance did not offer many clues. But in 1902, archaeologist Valerio Staes observed some strange gear-shaped teeth embedded in the bronze. He speculated that the object contained some kind of mechanism, a bold claim in an era when ancient machines were largely dismissed as fantasy. That was the first crack in the illusion, the first whisper of something far bigger. As the decades passed, the mystery deepened. The object was fragmented, broken into more than 80 pieces. But X-rays and CT scans revealed a level of mechanical sophistication that left scientists stunned. Inside this ancient artifact were interlocking gears, precisely cut, with ratios and movements calibrated to track celestial events with amazing precision. The device could predict eclipses, track the phases of the moon, chart the movement of the planets, and calculate the Olympic cycles centuries in advance. Historians now refer to it as the first analog computer ever. But that term, although accurate in a technical sense, barely captures the gravity of what the Antikythera Mechanism represents, as it raises a disturbing question. Who made it? The craftsmanship of the device suggests a deep knowledge of mathematics, engineering, and astronomy. It contains a differential gear, something that would not be officially reinvented until the 16th century in Europe. And yet, this mechanism was created sometime between 150 and 100 BC. Conventional historians attribute it to the Greeks, possibly inspired by the technology of Archimedes, but there is no other similar object. There are no records of similar machines, nor any writings describing their creation. It appears fully formed, unprecedented, and without successors, a technological singularity within the ancient world. We are left with the question of what civilization possessed such knowledge and why it disappeared. And this is where the mystery starts to take a turn, because the Antikythera Mechanism is more than just a technological marvel. It is an anomaly, an outlier, a contradiction in the timeline that we have been taught to accept. Let's imagine for a moment that we come across an iPhone buried inside a medieval crypt. That is the kind of cognitive dissonance that this artifact produces. It does not belong in the world in which it was found. And yet, it is real. Some scholars suggest that the Antikythera Mechanism was the crown jewel of a lost lineage of ancient engineering, a relic not of early inventions, but of decline. The last artifact of a civilization that once understood the stars with mechanical precision, a whisper from a forgotten golden age. Forgotten golden age. Others go even further. They suggest that it is proof of an entire lost epic of scientific achievements erased by time, war, and disaster. That what we call ancient Greece could have been the heir and not the originator of this knowledge. If true, this would mean that somewhere in the strata of lost centuries there existed a civilization capable of building machines that would be unrivaled for 2,000 years. Machines that were buried not only by water and salt, but by the deliberate oblivion wrought by history. And perhaps, just perhaps, the Antikythera Mechanism is not the only one. The more scientists study the Antikythera Mechanism, the more they realize how much it defies all explanation. X-ray tomography has allowed researchers to reconstruct the arrangement of its gears in astonishing detail. More than 30 bronze cogwheels are arranged in a network so complex that it would make even a Renaissance watchmaker marvel. Each gear is not merely a piece of metal. It is a calculation, a fragment of cosmic logic encoded in bronze. The device could simulate the movement of the sun and the moon with astonishing precision, taking into account the moon's elliptical orbit and even its irregular speed, known as the animalistic month. A subtle variation that modern science only began to understand after telescopes were invented. Even stranger is that the mechanism followed the Saros cycle, a period of approximately 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours between repeated eclipses of the sun and moon. The transmission ratios that represent this cycle are mathematically perfect. So perfect that one cogwheel has exactly 223 teeth, a direct correlation with the count of cycles of sadness in the lunar months. It was not a decorative object. It was a tool, a functional machine created for astronomers, navigators, or scholars, people who understood both the mechanics of the Earth and the rhythms of the sky. But what kind of culture possessed that dual mastery of art and science? We do not have a clear answer. If the Greeks manufactured it, why is this one unique? There are no copies, no simplifications, no continuations. It is like stumbling upon a Formula One car in ancient Rome, without roads, without factories, and without proof that anyone knew how to build wheels. Some theorists suggest that the mechanism was the masterpiece of a singular genius. Perhaps someone like Archimedes, who according to legend created automata and designed devices that surpassed his time. If that were true, it could be a unique and miraculous invention that was lost along with its creator. But others think differently. The complexity of the mechanism suggests refinement, not experimentation. Just as the iPhone is not the first Apple device, the Antikythera Mechanism does not look like a prototype. It seems the final result of a long technological lineage, one that has disappeared without a trace. So, where did it come from? And what does its existence mean for our understanding of history? That is where the theories get darker. Some researchers propose that there was once an entire school of scientific thought that existed in the Mediterranean, or perhaps even beyond, that was deliberately suppressed, annihilated by conquerors, religious fanatics, or natural catastrophes. Others suggest that the mechanism is part of a broader pattern, one that includes the pyramids of Giza, the precision of Machu Picchu, the celestial alignment of Göbekli Tepe. A pattern of ancient knowledge that continues to appear in ruins, masonry, and stories. Not as a legend, but as a legacy. Even conventional historians are beginning to reconsider the neat, linear history of human progress. What if technological advancement is not an escalation in a single direction, but a wave that rises and breaks again and again? What if civilizations rise, reach unimaginable heights, and then fall, forgotten under the rubble of time? The Antikythera Mechanism could be irrefutable proof of one of those lost waves. While the shipwreck that transported it slowly rusts on the seabed, now protected by international law and constantly monitored by underwater drones, divers continue to return in the hope of finding more fragments, more gears, more inscriptions, more clues, and each new piece discovered deepens the enigma instead of solving it. It is as if the sea itself guards the secrets of the mechanism, as if some knowledge were not destined to surface easily. But the most disturbing thing is that the mechanism was not found in a tomb, nor in a museum, nor in a library. It was discarded, lost in a shipwreck, as if it were not sacred, as if it were just one among many. What if there were dozens, hundreds? What if this was just one of many devices, casually transported across the ancient Mediterranean before something destroyed them all? What we know now is this. The Antikythera Mechanism is not an anomaly in history. It is a lock, a brief and fleeting glimpse into a forgotten chapter of human ingenuity, a chapter that we never knew existed. And behind that lock, the shadows of ancient minds still wait to be rediscovered. High in the remote reaches of the Bayan Kara Mountains, nestled between the borders of Tibet and China, lies one of the strangest enigmas of archaeology. An alleged discovery so strange, so impossible to place in the history of humanity, that the most prestigious scholars have long dismissed it as fantasy. And yet, the story never dies. The story begins in 1938, when a Chinese archaeologist named Chiput led an expedition to the deepest parts of these unexplored mountain ranges. According to dark, controversial, and often secondhand reports, his team came across interconnected caves filled with small, slender-bodied skeletons, each no more than 120 meters tall. The skulls were unusually large. Their fragile structures seemed alien, almost childlike, but they were arranged with ritual precision, as if buried with great care. But what really baffled Chiput and his team were the artifacts among the remains. More than 700 stone discs, each about 23 centimeters in diameter, with a precise hole in the center, like ancient vinyl records. On their surfaces were engraved narrow spiral grooves that appeared not to be decorative motifs, but writing. Microscopic and finely engraved characters coiled inward from the outer edge of each disc to the central hole, as if telling a story designed to be deciphered, not admired. For years, these discs were supposedly stored in secret, considered too strange to classify. It was not until the 1960s that a professor named Some Unwi at the Academy of Ancient Studies in Beijing gained access to them. What he claimed to decipher shocked the academic world and was immediately embroiled in controversy. According to his translations, the discs spoke of a race called the Dropa, beings who had crashed on Earth from another planet some 12,000 years ago. Abandoned in the relentless terrain of the Bayan Mountains, they sought refuge in the caves and tried to integrate with local tribes. The inscriptions supposedly described the crash of their ship, their struggles with the hostile inhabitants, and their final destiny, a mixture of genetics, culture, and technology before disappearing into the folds of myth and stone. Needless to say, the story seems taken from the pages of a cheap science fiction novel. Critics have dismissed it as a hoax, pointing to the impossibility of physically accessing the discs today. The controversial credentials of Some Nui and the strange moment in which the translations were published, coinciding with the global rise of fascination with UFOs. But there is something about the Dropa stones that refuses to disappear. Over the decades, photographs have appeared, blurred, aged, and often impossible to verify, showing strange disc-shaped objects with concentric grooves, as described. Visitors to obscure Chinese museums in the 70s and 80s reported seeing the stones firsthand, although they were never officially exhibited under that name. Then, as mysteriously as they appeared, they vanished from public view. And that is where things get stranger. In the early 2000s, a German engineer named Hartwig Hausdorff, known for his work on ancient astronaut theories, claimed to have personally investigated the region. He reported conversations with locals who conveyed oral legends about the Dropa people, described in disturbingly similar terms. Short stature, large heads, and descendants of beings who came from the stars. Skeptics point out that no academic article about these discs has ever been published in a peer-reviewed journal. Conventional archaeology treats the Dropa stones as folklore, fascinating but impossible to prove. However, those who delve into the story often wonder, why is this story so persistent? Why does it keep reappearing decade after decade, always on the verge of credibility, but never quite disappearing? Perhaps it is the tempting mix of elements: contact with aliens, ancient technology, forbidden archaeology, and government-imposed silence that makes the legend of the Dropa captivate the imagination. Or maybe it's something deeper, the feeling that humanity may not be alone in its long, winding history. That perhaps we are not the first or only travelers on this planet. But before dismissing it, there is one more curious detail to the story. In the heart of the Beira region, two isolated ethnic groups, the Dropa and the Ham, still live today. Anthropologists studying their physical characteristics have observed that they are genetically and physiologically distinct from the Han Chinese, with an unusually short stature and cranial features that some have controversially linked to the ancient remains described in the Chiput reports. Coincidence, genetic drift, or something more? Next, we will delve into the aftermath of the discovery, the efforts to bury the stones, the researchers who risked their careers chasing shadows, and the disturbing modern parallels that suggest the story of the Dropa could be more than just a myth. The story of the Dropa stones does not end in the caves of Baianula. In fact, it becomes more elusive and disturbing as it crosses into the modern era, where mystery joins repression and curiosity begins to border on paranoia. After Professor Some Unwi published his controversial interpretation of the stone discs in the early 1960s, he supposedly faced strong backlash from the Chinese academic community. His translation, considered at best pseudoscience and at worst dangerous misinformation, was supposedly banned in official scientific journals. Some versions claim that he was forced to resign. Others suggest that he fled to Japan and was never heard from again. As a result of this controversy, access to the Dropa stones was supposedly revoked, and the artifacts disappeared into oblivion. But despite efforts to erase the discovery from memory, the stones refused to be forgotten. In 1974, Austrian engineer Erich von Däniken, known for his book Chariots of the Gods, drew public attention to the Dropa legend as part of a broader theory claiming that ancient astronauts visited Earth. Although von Däniken himself never claimed to have seen the stones, his wide audience made the story known to millions of people, where it quickly flourished in the collective imagination of those eager for answers beyond traditional history. Then came the photographs. In 1994, a set of images supposedly taken in a small museum in Xi'an, China, the Banu Museum, appeared, showing circular stone discs with clear spiral engravings. According to visitors, an explanatory label described them as old photographic records, though the staff did not give many details. These images circulated in UFO magazines and marginal archaeology forums, which unleashed new debates. Were they falsifications, or the same discs that disappeared decades before? The response from academia was a mixture of rejection and silence. The institutions denied possessing any artifacts. The academics described the photos as falsifications, and, nevertheless, nobody could explain where the original 700 discs had gone. No official record of their cataloging, transfer, or destruction was ever presented. It seemed as if they had been erased. This absence only deepened the mystery. Why hide the discs if they were just myths? Why not make them available so the public could dispel the legends once and for all? Hartwig Hausdorff, the German researcher who traveled to the region, suggested the answer could lie in the implications of their authenticity. If the Dropa stones were authentic and some Onyumui's translations had some validity, then history, as we know, it would crumble. Our linear understanding of human evolution, technological development, and isolation in the universe would collapse under the weight of a story that we were not ready to face. But there is more. Reportedly, during his research, Hausdorff obtained a translated fragment from one disc. It says, "The Dropa descended from the clouds in their aircraft. Our men, women, and children hid in caves 10 times before dawn. When they finally understood the signs and saw that the Dropa came in peace, they joined their hearts to them." It is a poetic, almost mythical account, but strangely coherent. Intercultural accounts from around the world echo similar motifs. Beings from the sky, peaceful contact, initial fear followed by reverence. Whether it is the Dune people of Mali, who speak of stellar beings from Sirius, or the hopeful legends of the ant people who guided us through the cataclysm, stories like these resonate throughout human history as fragments of a forgotten choir. Could the Dropa legend be another note of that song? In recent years, efforts to authenticate the story have continued in more discreet circles. Independent researchers, linguists, and fringe scientists have tried to replicate the supposed inscriptions on the discs using known Proto-Chinese systems and microscopic engraving techniques. Some found similarities, others found nothing. No consensus was reached, only more questions arose. In 2005, a retired Chinese geologist presented himself anonymously and claimed to have handled a Dropa disc when he was young. He described its composition as mainly silicon with traces of cobalt and other rare metals, suggesting advanced knowledge of metallurgy. But without physical evidence, his testimony faded into the digital ether. However, another whisper in the wind. And so, the legend continues to float in the fog between history and deception, between discovery and denial. Could it all be an elaborate invention? Perhaps. But then, why do so many elements of the story persist? Why do the peoples of the Bayan Karaula Highlands still bear the names of Dropa and Ham? Why does nobody know the fate of the original discs? Or what is more chilling, why does nobody want to know? As with many forbidden discoveries, it is not only the existence of the artifact that disturbs the power structures. It is the questions they inspire, the paradigms they threaten. A cave full of ancient beings holding discs that speak of visitors from the stars could challenge more than just archaeology. It could challenge everything. And so, the Dropa stones remain in limbo, hidden, perhaps destroyed, perhaps still waiting under layers of dust and bureaucracy. But the legend lives on, whispering from a mountain range shrouded in clouds, inviting us to look further and wonder what truths might be hidden under the silence. Everything begins with an excavator. In the early 1930s, while the United Fruit Company cleared the dense jungle to make way for banana plantations in Dissa, Costa Rica, its workers stumbled under layers of vegetation and soil that had claimed them over centuries. At first, they were simply curiosities, strange decorations that the workers rolled away, sometimes even destroyed or dynamited, hoping to find gold hidden inside. But soon the magnitude of their presence and the mystery surrounding their origin would attract the attention of archaeologists from all over the world. It was not about common stones. Its near-perfect spherical symmetry, achieved without known advanced tools, baffled even the most experienced researchers. How could an ancient people have molded solid granite into such smooth and geometrically precise shapes without iron tools or modern measuring instruments? And more importantly, why did the spheres not resemble anything previously discovered in the Americas? They had no inscriptions, no written language, or symbolic marks. They did not seem like objects of daily use or parts of temples. They were simply there, imposing, deliberate, precise, and completely silent. Some of the spheres were arranged in what appeared to be lines pointing toward the rising sun during the solstices or equinoxes, giving rise to theories about their use as astronomical markers or calendars. Others appeared in triangular groupings or as part of larger, undefined patterns, as if they had once formed a map or code, now lost to time. The indigenous peoples of the region, the Barua, the Taraba, and other Chibchan-speaking groups, had no known oral tradition that explained the spheres. Even for them, they were remnants of a forgotten past. As news spread beyond Costa Rica, the spheres became the focus of international curiosity. However, despite decades of study, carbon dating, and satellite imaging, no conclusive answers were obtained. The researchers determined that they were probably created between the years 600 and 500 BCE, but their exact age remains uncertain due to the absence of organic material in direct contact with the stones. Attempts to link them with known pre-Columbian civilizations in that region only increase the mystery. Unlike the pyramids of Mesoamerica or the Nazca Lines of Peru, the stone spheres had no monuments, temples, or inscriptions to accompany them. They stood solitary in their silence, scattered across fields and forests like orphaned messages from a vanished civilization. And then, as if to further protect their secrets, many were moved. As interest in the spheres grew, they were unearthed and moved to squares, parks, and gardens of wealthy collectors. In some cases, their original alignment was lost forever, meaning an irreversible erasure of possible clues. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the stone spheres is this. Their purpose has never been discovered. Were they used to track the stars, represent celestial bodies, trace the migratory patterns of ancient tribes, or mark sacred places? Or do they have an even more abstract meaning? A spiritual message, a ritual symbol, or a cosmic enigma? However much the researchers investigate, the truth remains disconcertingly unattainable. And, like many forbidden discoveries, the stone spheres have inspired a series of alternative theories, from ancient aliens to lost civilizations predating known history. Some propose that the spheres are relics of Atlantis. Others suggest that they were created by visitors from other planets who once walked on Earth. These theories, although often dismissed by conventional academia, continue to fuel public fascination because the silence of the stones invites projection, myth, and mystery. They are an enigma in perfect form, the the soft curves of an ancient whisper that refuses interpretation, not lost, but hidden, perhaps on purpose. And this is only the beginning. Now, let's delve into the conflicting interpretations, modern efforts to conserve them, and the strange phenomenon of how knowledge about the spheres became buried almost as deeply as the artifacts themselves. As archaeologists continued their work in the late 20th and early 21st centuries, the stone spheres of Costa Rica remained stubbornly silent. They revealed little, if anything, about the culture that created them, and even less about their purpose. However, the more they investigated, the more mysterious the spheres became, not only because of what was known, but because of what had been forgotten, discarded, or systematically erased. The majority opinion, cautious and measured, maintains that the spheres were created by the Diquis culture, a pre-Columbian civilization that once thrived in southern Costa Rica. This people, part of the broader cultural group of the Chibchanes, was known for its skilled artisans, experts in goldsmithing and stone carving. But although their manual work is visible in jewelry and small sculptures, there is nothing else in the known archaeological records that can be compared to the scale, effort, and precision of the spheres. This discrepancy has fueled much speculation. Skeptics wonder how a culture without metal tools could shape andesite and granodiorite, some of the hardest rock types, to create near-perfect spheres. Even today, achieving that level of precision without computer-guided machinery requires a great deal of manual labor. Did the Diquis possess lost techniques that have now been completely erased from memory? Was their technology more advanced than we think? Some propose that the stones were shaped with smaller rocks and then polished with sand. At first glance, it seems plausible, but could such primitive methods produce dozens, possibly hundreds, of spheres throughout the region with such astonishing uniformity? And then there is also the question of transport. Many of these spheres were discovered kilometers away from any known quarry. Some weighed more than 10,000 kilograms without wheeled vehicles or draft animals. How were they transported? Were they rolled across the terrain, floated on rafts, or dragged along dirt roads? Each theory raises more questions than answers, especially because there are similar feats of transport engineering in megalithic sites around the world, many of which share the same disturbing silence and the inexplicable. The more you look, the more you see a pattern. Isolated sites of precise stone artifacts appear around the world without clear explanation. For some, these patterns suggest contact with lost civilizations or unknown systems of knowledge. Perhaps they argue that there was once a global network of knowledge long before written history that united these builders. The spheres of Costa Rica are often compared to the ancient pipes of China, the megaliths of Malta, or the moai of Easter Island. Separate cultures, similar anomalies. Then there are those who point to the stars. Some spheres appear to have been arranged in geometric patterns aligned with astronomical phenomena. Early maps and field notes point to linear placements, triangular groupings, and even possible representations of planetary systems. Could the spheres have had a centric purpose? Were they ceremonial? Or were they simply symbolic representations of a worldview that saw the cosmos reflected on Earth? Even stranger, some researchers believe that the spheres may contain coded mathematical proportions, such as pi or the golden ratio, embedded in their dimensions. If true, that would imply a level of abstract reasoning far beyond what the known cultures of the region were believed to possess. But perhaps the most disturbing thing is not the mystery itself, but the way it was dismissed. For decades, the spheres were ignored, relocated, and even destroyed. Many were rolled into gardens, placed as lawn ornaments, or locked away in warehouses. Their original location, which could be the key to understanding them, was lost. In effect, we erased the context, which made it even more difficult to solve the enigma. Today, Costa Rica has taken steps towards preserving what remains. The most important group of spheres discovered in Feninas 6, an old banana plantation, has been declared a World Heritage Site by UNESCO. Visitors can now walk among the spheres in their original environment under the watchful eye of archaeologists and historians hoping to salvage what can still be understood. But even here, among the best preserved arrangements, questions linger like fog. Why were they so perfectly shaped? Why were they placed in specific formations? And why, after almost a century of study, do they remain as silent as ever? Under the gentle tropical rain, you can almost hear the whisper of something forgotten on purpose. Not just by time, but perhaps by design. What if these spheres were not meant to be understood by us? Not now. Not yet. What if we were contemplating a message written in a language that is not of letters or sounds, but of shapes, space, and silence? Leaving behind the jungles of Costa Rica, our journey through forbidden discoveries continues, not to offer clear answers, but to delve deeper into the enigma. Because sometimes the most important thing is not to solve the mystery, but to wonder why it exists. In the heart of present-day Iraq, once the cradle of ancient Mesopotamian splendor, a curious object was discovered, one that would trigger decades of debate, fascination, and disbelief. It was in the early 1930s, and a team of archaeologists working near Qujut Rabua, on the outskirts of Baghdad, was cataloging relics from a region long considered one of the cradles of civilization. Among the fragments of ceramics, figurines, and ancient scrolls, a peculiar object stood out, modest in size, but impossible to explain. At first glance, it looked like a simple clay pot about 12 centimeters high, sealed with an asphalt stopper. Inside, the archaeologists found a copper cylinder, and inside that cylinder, an iron bar, corroded and discolored. It was not just any container. It had no inscriptions or ornate designs. It was rough, primitive, functional, and defied all expectations. Years later, after being studied by Wilhelm Koig, then director of the Baghdad Museum, it would be given a name that still has an air of forbidden mystery today: the Baghdad Battery. Koig proposed a theory so bold that it shocked the academic community. He believed that the device, this 2,000-year-old clay vessel, was not a ceremonial object or a storage container, but a galvanic cell, a battery capable of producing electricity at a time when electricity was not even a word. Let that sink in for a moment. A battery from ancient Mesopotamia. If true, this would rewrite the history of technology as we know it. Electricity, one of the greatest achievements of modern civilization, might have been born not in the laboratories of the Enlightenment, but in the sands of the ancient world. Koenig was not the only one to think so. Over the years, researchers built replicas of the Baghdad Battery using lemon juice, vinegar, or grape juice as electrolytes. To their amazement, the device functioned. A small electric current was generated, weak but real, enough to potentially galvanize gold or give a mild shock. But this only deepened the mystery. What could the ancients have used such a device for? There are no records, plans, workshop drawings, or texts suggesting that Mesopotamians understood or harnessed electricity in a widespread way. And yet, there was an object that refused to conform to its era's limits. Skeptics quickly questioned it. They argued that the object's electrical function was a coincidence, a modern misinterpretation. Perhaps it had a religious purpose, or was used to store sacred scrolls, or even contain precious oils or inks. But if so, why the metal parts? Why an iron rod suspended inside a copper cylinder? Why did the asphalt plug seal the top in such a way that it formed a perfectly closed environment for chemical reactions? Too many coincidences, a design that's too precise. And then the story takes a darker turn. During the American invasion of Iraq in 2003, the Baghdad Museum was looted. Artifacts of incalculable value disappeared. Among them, according to some, the original Baghdad Battery. Although some objects were recovered, the original remains shrouded in uncertainty. What was exactly lost? What was stolen? What could private collectors have taken away, never to be seen again? Could it be that the key to one of the most enigmatic technological questions of the ancient world was simply taken, hidden, or even destroyed? And perhaps the most disturbing thing of all is that this knowledge was deliberately buried. Imagine the implications. If the Baghdad Battery is authentic, if it was really used to generate electricity 2 millennia ago, then the entire chronology of scientific progress looks fragile. What other technologies might have existed and are now reduced to dust or dismissed by scholars who cannot believe what they see? What if this was just one piece of a larger puzzle? A fragment of a forgotten science, a whisper of a past more advanced than we're willing to admit. As the rain gently hits the museum window and the soft hum of fluorescent lights flickers over the rows of ancient objects, one cannot help but wonder, did someone long ago hold that clay vessel in their hands and really know it contained power? That it could bring light or a shock, or perhaps something else? The silence of the past becomes louder as we listen. And in that silence, the Baghdad Battery waits, not only as an artifact, but as a question that refuses to disappear. What if we are wrong about the past? Not just wrong, but fundamentally wrong. What if the ancients possessed a level of scientific knowledge that we have overlooked, not because it did not exist, but because we were unwilling to see it? This is the lens through which many independent researchers view the Baghdad Battery. In the first part, we explore the object itself, its curious design, its discovery, and the basic experiments demonstrating its potential to generate electricity. But to truly understand its potential, we must go further. Let's go back to the proposed purpose of this artifact. Conventional archaeology is, by nature, conservative. It insists on verifiable patterns, documented uses, and cultural context. And in the case of the Baghdad Battery, none of that clearly fits. There is no ancient Mesopotamian scroll extolling the wonders of electricity, nor are there any other known batteries, generators, or light bulbs. At first glance, this is an orphaned artifact, a rarity without family. But anomalies like this often hold the most tempting clues. One of the most popular theories about the Baghdad Battery is that it could have been used for electroplating, the process of coating objects with a thin layer of metal, such as gold or silver, through the use of electric current. Some point to the jewels of ancient Egypt, which show uniformity and microscopic precision in their gold layers, something difficult to achieve with purely mechanical means. Was it possible that knowledge of electrochemistry was not invented in modern Europe, but simply rediscovered? Could the artisans of the ancient Near East have used small batteries to electroplate objects with gold and silver, giving them value, shine, and status? There is even a legend found in ancient texts about temples in the region that contained statues that sparked when touched or objects that repelled the hand. Most scholars interpret this as myth or metaphor. But what if they were not? What if these stories reflected real experiences born of primitive but effective electrical technology? If this seems far-fetched, let us consider the following. The Greek philosopher Thales, who wrote in the 6th century A.C., already observed the phenomenon of static electricity when rubbing amber with skin. That was over 2,500 years ago. We often take it for granted that science must evolve in a linear fashion, that knowledge accumulates without interruption. But history tells us otherwise. Civilizations fall, libraries burn, knowledge is lost, and when that happens, we must begin again. Perhaps the Battery of Baghdad was not part of an advanced technological era, but was a vestige of it, a surviving echo of a much older scientific tradition that was already disappearing when it was manufactured. This raises a deeper question. Why are we so uncomfortable with these discoveries? Why do we rush to explain them, to dismiss them, to minimize them? There's a psychological reason for this. We are conditioned by education, the media, and culture to believe that progress always moves forward, that we are the most advanced human beings to have ever walked the earth. Therefore, when an ancient object challenges that narrative, it not only arouses curiosity, but threatens our identity. And yet, despite that resistance, these artifacts keep appearing. They persist as fossils of forgotten ideas. The Baghdad Battery, whether or not it is a genuine example of ancient electricity, has done something extraordinary. It has forced us to ask better questions, to re-examine what we thought we knew. And there is one last layer to this mystery. In the modern era, we understand that technological advances often occur together. Electricity gave rise to light bulbs, communication, engines, and much more. If the ancients really had access to electricity, where are the other inventions? Could it be that they never got that far? That they discovered electricity by chance, used it in an isolated and limited way, but never came to understand its full potential? Or could it be that the archaeological record is incomplete, not because the artifacts never existed, but because we have not yet found them? Or even worse, because someone doesn't want us to find them. This is where conspiracy theories begin to emerge. Many are too speculative to take as fact, but they all start from the same feeling. Something just doesn't add up. The Baghdad Battery is at the center of that feeling. It is as much an object as a symbol of forgotten innovation, of lost potential, and perhaps of a much more complex past than we dare admit. As the night progresses and the flickering candlelight mimics that first flash of artificial energy, we are left with a disturbing possibility. What if electricity is not a modern marvel, but an ancient secret rediscovered? And what else is hidden under the sands and stones of antiquity, waiting for us to see it, not with disbelief but with open eyes? In the sun-scorched deserts of present-day Pakistan, nestled near the winding Indus River, lies the ghost of a city so ancient, so advanced, and so enigmatic that even seasoned archaeologists hesitate to speak of it without showing a hint of awe. Mohenjo-Daro, a name that translates chillingly as Mound of the Dead. Discovered in the 1920s during British colonial excavations, the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro did not emerge as the dilapidated remains of a primitive tribe, but as the remains of a civilization that rivaled, and in many ways surpassed, its contemporaries in Mesopotamia and Egypt. It was not just a city. It was a planned metropolis with straight, cobbled streets, multi-story brick buildings, sophisticated drainage and sewage systems, and even what many believe was a centralized public bath. Possibly the world's first example of urban sanitation, and it existed more than 4,000 years ago. How could such complexity arise at such an early stage in human history? Conventional chronology struggles to explain it, and yet the stones of Mohenjo-Daro remain standing, telling their silent history to anyone who wants to listen. But beneath its silent streets hides a deeper mystery, provoking controversy, denial, and whispered theories of an ancient catastrophe. It all began with the skeletons. Dozens of human remains were scattered around the ruins. They were not buried or entombed with ceremony, but thrown in the streets, embracing each other face down in alleys and patios, as if something sudden, devastating, and definitive had hit them. Even stranger, these skeletons had unusual levels of radiation. According to reports, some anecdotal, others published, the remains registered radiation levels far above normal. It was said that one skeleton in particular had radiation levels 50 times higher than normal, and that the ground around it was also radioactive. If true, this would be inexplicable by natural causes. The Indus Valley is not known for uranium deposits. There are no nuclear facilities or modern pollutants. This gave rise to a surprising and terrifying theory. Could Mohenjo-Daro have been destroyed by a nuclear explosion? At first, the idea seems absurd, far-fetched, a feverish dream. And yet, the questions still persist. Some buildings appear to have melted or fused at incredibly high temperatures. Stones would require more than 1,000 degrees Celsius to vitrify. A specific place, called the epicenter, showed signs of extreme heat. According to reports, the bricks in this area turned to glass. There were no signs of volcanic activity or fire, only instantaneous, total, unnatural destruction. Traditional explanations fail to fully account for the extent of damage. They attribute the fall of Mohenjo-Daro to floods, climate change, and the deterioration of the river system. All are plausible, all are safe, but none explain radiation. None explain the vitrified stone. None explain why the skeletons lie as if frozen in mid-flight, as if something invisible and powerful had knocked them down in an instant. Mythologies enter the scene. Ancient Hindu texts such as the Mahabharata and the Ramayana speak of terrible weapons wielded by the gods. Divine machines could destroy entire cities in a flash of fire. One of these passages describes a weapon called the Brahmastra, a projectile that burned with the light of 10,000 suns, scorching the earth and turning it into crystal. It is tempting to draw a line between myth and Mohenjo-daro. To imagine a world in which ancient technologies existed that we no longer understand, and in which weapons of mass destruction were not invented, but rediscovered in the 20th century. What if Mohenjo-daro was not just a city ahead of time? What if it was a city destroyed by knowledge that surpassed it? A technology that went out of control or was deliberately unleashed? The implications are astonishing. A prehistoric war, lost civilizations with advanced energy sources, forgotten ages of technological greatness buried by war, time, and cataclysm. But perhaps the real reason this theory remains in the shadows is not because it lacks evidence, but because it asks us to believe impossible things. That once, long before our current world, another ended. To fully appreciate the mystery surrounding Mohenjo-daro, one must venture beyond the ruins and delve into the pages of the Vedic texts, ancient Sanskrit scriptures, some of which even predate the city itself. These are not simple religious writings. They are epics, cosmic stories, accounts of wars between gods, flying chariots known as vimanas, and the use of weapons so devastating that they reflect descriptions of modern atomic bombs. A passage from the Mahabharata says, "A single projectile charged with the power of the universe. An incandescent column of smoke and flames as bright as 10,000 suns rose in splendor. It was an unknown weapon, an iron thunderbolt, a gigantic messenger of death. It is said that the ground was scorched. Hair and nails fell out. The birds turned white. The food was contaminated, and the survivors threw themselves into rivers to escape the heat." It is hard not to see echoes of radiation poisoning in these words. The described sequels reflect what we understand today as symptoms of radioactive fallout. And yet, these texts were written over 2,000 years ago, narrating events that, it is said, occurred even further back. Skeptics argue that these are metaphors, mythical language used to tell moral stories. But others ask a disturbing question. What if they weren't metaphors? What if the ancient authors described something real? Something seen, experienced, and feared? Could there have been a forgotten war, a cataclysm that swept away not only cities, but the entire record of human achievements? And if so, why has it been forgotten? This is where the term forbidden archaeology becomes relevant. Because, although conventional archaeologists may dismiss these ideas as marginal or pseudoscientific, there are persistent rumors of discoveries silently buried, ignored findings, and suppressed evidence because they do not fit the established narrative. A handful of researchers and journalists have claimed that the first excavations at Mohenjo-daro unearthed much more unusual objects than skeletons and bathtubs. Artifacts resembling metallic tools, carvings depicting flying objects, and even magnetic anomalies deep in the earth. If true, why weren't these findings published? Why are some excavation notes missing? Why do many photos from the 20s and 30s seem to show more complex ruins than what is seen today? Some theorists believe that it is not only historical inertia, but active institutional resistance. The fear of rewriting history, of recognizing that the past may not be a slow linear ascent, but a cycle of boom, splendor, and collapse, a cycle of which we too may be a part. And then there is the question of technology. If Mohenjo-daro was really the scene of a nuclear event, where did that technology come from? One theory suggests that it was the final act of a lost civilization, perhaps one whose knowledge surpassed ours in some areas. Their cities may now be submerged, eroded, or built over by time, but they left traces, impossible architecture, ancient batteries, celestial alignments, and perhaps catastrophic warnings. Another, more controversial theory speculates about extraterrestrial involvement. The idea that a non-human intelligence visited Earth in the past, or even lived among early humans and shared its technology or brought its own conflicts. Although the idea of ancient aliens remains a hot topic in culture, it continues to gain ground in popular imagination. Books, documentaries, and declassified military files have fueled the possibility that our past is much more complicated and connected to the stars than we ever imagined. But Mohenjo-daro offers something unusual in these speculations. Physical evidence. The skeletons, the vitrified bricks, the strangely sophisticated urban planning, the disturbing similarity to nuclear phenomena. Unlike other myths, here we have the smoking ruins and perhaps irrefutable proof. So why does this story remain marginal? Perhaps because it forces us to face uncomfortable truths. That civilizations can fall. That knowledge can be lost. That technology, once released, does not always serve its creators. And that we too live in an era of immense power and increasing fragility. As you delve into this documentary, imagine the last days of Mohenjo-daro, a city that was once full of life. Bustling streets, markets, priests who cared for the Great Bath, engineers who control water flow. Then, one day, a flash, a silent heat wave, people frozen in their movements, walls melting, silence. Only dust and echoes remain. And perhaps, buried among those ruins, a warning that the ancients tried to convey, not in stone or parchments, but in myths, in memory, in the still radioactive bones of the dead. In the heart of the inhospitable Nevada desert, about 32 kilometers south of Lovelock, lies a modest cavern carved into limestone. From the outside, Lovelock Cave is nothing special, just a dry, windswept hollow carved into a hillside. But within its shadowy walls emerges a story so strange, so contrary to accepted history, that it has become one of the most enduring and disturbing mysteries in American archaeology. The story does not begin with scientists or explorers, but with miners. In the early 20th century, guano miners, men seeking valuable bat droppings for fertilizer, entered the Lovelock Cave to excavate. But in their rudimentary work, they unearthed something unexpected. Ancient artifacts, baskets, tools, and bones. Many. The miners alerted authorities, and soon archaeologists were called. In the following years, formal excavations revealed it was no ordinary site. It was a prehistoric cemetery that contained remains and objects that dated back thousands of years. Radiocarbon dating would later place some findings around 2000 BC. BC, far older than initially imagined. But it wasn't only the age of the findings that drew attention. It was its size. Some of the skulls and bones recovered were unusually large. The reports of the first researchers and the accounts of the local newspapers described human remains of more than 2 meters in height, and it was rumored that some were approaching 3 or even 3.5 meters. The bones, especially the femurs and jaws, were proportionally enormous, dwarfing those of average human skeletons. Who were these people? Was it a genetic anomaly or something more? And then there was the legend. The northern Paiute tribe, indigenous to the region, had long passed down stories that had been passed down from generation to generation. According to them, their ancestors fought a race of red-haired giant cannibals known as the Sita. These beings were said to be ruthless, tall, and to live in Nevada caves. After years of conflict, the ancestors of the Paiute trapped the last of the Sitaka in a cave, set it on fire, and put an end to their reign. According to Paiute tradition, that cave was Lovelock Cave. Suddenly, the pieces seemed to fit together. A mysterious charred cave, huge bones, red hair found among some remains. Was this archaeological confirmation of the indigenous legend? The idea was tempting and very controversial. Conventional archaeologists recognized the site's importance, but downplayed or flatly denied the existence of giant remains. Some claimed that the red hair was simply black hair that had discolored over the centuries. Others said the bones had been misidentified or lost over time. And that in itself is one of the story's strangest parts. Reportedly, many original giant skeletons sent to museums or universities have disappeared. Some are said to be stored away. The whereabouts of others are unknown. Skeptics argue this is due to poor documentation and outdated conservation. But alternative theorists point to something more disturbing, a deliberate effort to suppress evidence challenging the conventional view of prehistory. Why would anyone want to hide evidence of giants? Because it rewrites human history. If true, it suggests ancient North America was home not only to tribes and hunter-gatherers, but to a completely different, possibly dominant species or subspecies of giant hominids. This raises uncomfortable questions about evolution, coexistence, and science's selective memory. To add fuel to the fire, this is not only case. Throughout the United States, there have been dozens of reports, especially in the 19th and early 20th centuries, of giant skeletons discovered in mounds, riverbanks, and caves. Many of these reports were documented in local newspapers and even in field notes from the Smithsonian. However, almost universally, these skeletons are said to have disappeared or been discredited without explanation. Could it be a coincidence? A series of misidentified bones? Or is there a pattern of intentional erasure, an effort to cleanse historical records of uncomfortable truths? Back in Lovelock, the cave still stands. It is dry, silent, and almost forgotten. But some visitors swear that even today, inside its dusty hollow, they can feel something else. Not exactly a presence, but a memory. A whisper of giants, of fire, of past battles. As you drift to sleep, let your mind travel back to a Nevada where shadows lengthened more than men and legends walked among the living. As the desert winds swept through the Lovelock Cave, burying its mysteries under layers of dust, the deepest mystery was not what had been found, but what happened after the discoveries. In the years after the initial excavations, as artifacts and skeletal remains were cataloged and dispersed, the story of the alleged Lovelock giants began to fade from public memory. Despite the striking headlines in local newspapers and tribal legends, institutions such as the Smithsonian and local museums adopted a more conservative approach, and the narrative began to shift from shocking possibility to routine anthropology. Artifacts were exhibited: baskets, duck decoys, stone tools, pieces of the pot and pre-Pute past. But the bones, the ones that aroused controversy, gradually disappeared from public access. Reportedly, some were destroyed by improper handling, others were labeled lost, and the largest skeletons disappeared completely. Independent researchers, including some retired archaeologists and local historians, attempted to locate these remains. They submitted requests, rummaged archives, and even visited warehouses where old finds were stored. But time and again, they ran into dead ends, missing records, mislabeled boxes, and museum officials who simply shrugged or gave bureaucratic answers. It was not only frustrating, it was unsettling. The more they searched, the more it seemed that someone, somewhere, had quietly buried the story of the Lovelock giants along with the bones themselves. Enter the theory of suppression. Many proponents of this theory argue that archaeological giants pose a direct challenge to established narratives about human development. If confirmed, these discoveries could dismantle fundamental pillars of Darwinian evolution, migration theory, and anthropological models. They don't fit into the timeline. They don't fit into the scheme, and they certainly don't fit into the clean, linear progression taught in schools. For some, this is reason enough to hide the evidence, not through a grand conspiracy, but through institutional inertia. When discoveries do not fit the prevailing paradigm, they are considered outliers, anomalies. And over time, anomalies are quietly discarded, ignored, or lost. But legends have a way of surviving where bones do not. The Northern Paiute people still speak of the Sikh today. Some elders claim that the Lovelock Cave was not the only place where the giants lived, that similar beings existed in Nevada, Utah, and even California. They speak of cannibalism, violent conflicts, and a long battle between humans and beings who may not have been entirely human. Could these accounts be distorted memories of a real and forgotten race? Or are they metaphors, warnings wrapped in mythology? In 2014, renewed interest in the Lovelock story led researchers to return to the cave. Using modern tools, they re-examined the few remains that remained. Although they did not find giants, they did confirm something fascinating. There was massive fire damage, layers of charred earth, and soot embedded in the ceiling, just as the pot legends described. At a minimum, it appears that something was burned alive inside that cave. And there is more. Some speculate that the red hair found in the cave is not typical of Native American populations. Although conventional archaeology dismisses this possibility as natural discoloration, genetic studies have hinted at more complex interactions between early American peoples and now extinct hominid species, possibly even Denisovans or other unknown lineages. Others believe that the Lovelock giants were survivors of a prehistoric cataclysm, remnants of a lost civilization erased from history. They link the story to global myths of giants, such as the Nephilim of the Bible or the Titans of Greek mythology. These beings are often described not only as large, but also as powerful, ancient, and ultimately defeated by humanity. Is the Cave of Love a small piece of a much larger puzzle? Think about it. Stories of red-haired giants are not limited to Nevada. Similar legends resonate in the Pacific Islands, the Andes, and the British Isles. Cultures separated by oceans share accounts of tall, red-haired beings who lived apart, sometimes warring with humanity, and who eventually disappeared. What if these are not isolated myths, but fragmented memories of a forgotten truth? And if so, what happened to them? Were they extinguished or exterminated? The stillness of the Lovelock Cave offers no answers. Only questions. Layers and layers of questions buried beneath the sands of time. Perhaps that is why it attracts so many people, not only for what it contains, but for what it refuses to reveal. In that darkness, as you close your eyes and immerse yourself in the documentary, imagine the faint echo of ancient footsteps. Imagine towering silhouettes moving in the dim light. Listen carefully, and maybe you will hear it. The sound of a door closing seals the last trace of the giants that once roamed under the Nevada sky. In the arid silence of the Giza Plateau, while the golden sands swirl around the feet of the Great Pyramids, a mystery as old as civilization looms beneath the surface. We have been told that they are tombs, majestic resting places for kings who ruled when gods walked among men. But what if that is not the whole story? What if these colossal monuments were never tombs? The Great Pyramid of Giza, the last wonder remaining of the ancient world, has long captivated scholars, tourists, and mystics. With a height of almost 500 feet and built with more than 2 million blocks of limestone and granite, some of which weigh more than 70 tons, it defies all explanation, even by modern engineering standards. Traditional Egyptologists argue that these are burial sites built by the pharaoh Khufu and others during the 4th dynasty. However, no mummies have ever been conclusively discovered inside the Great Pyramid. There are no funerary inscriptions, no sarcophagi in their place, only empty chambers, an unsettling silence, an architecture so precise and advanced that some now believe it was not built only for the dead, but for energy. Enter the Giza power plant theory, a radical idea introduced by the engineer Christopher Dunn, who argued that the Great Pyramid was not a tomb, but an incredibly advanced machine, an energy generator left by civilization far more sophisticated than we believe. Let's begin with the construction itself. The internal layout of the Great Pyramid differs greatly from that of other Egyptian pyramids. There are 3 main chambers: the King's Chamber, the Queen's Chamber, and a mysterious underground room carved into rock. None of them have been shown to have a traditional function. Instead, they form a pattern resembling components found in modern power plants. Dunn proposed that the pyramid was built using vibratory resonance, whereby the structure harnessed and transformed the Earth's seismic energy. The underground chamber served as a resonating chamber, capturing the natural frequency of Earth's crust. This energy was channeled upwards through the Great Gallery, which functioned as an acoustic waveguide. At the heart of the system was the King's Chamber, built with huge blocks of quartz-rich granite. Why is this significant? Quartz is piezoelectric. It produces electricity when compressed or subjected to vibration. Could the King's Chamber have been a piezoelectric reactor designed to convert vibratory energy into electrical energy? Even more intriguing is the chamber's design. The so-called inner sarcophagus is made of a single block of hard granite, hollowed out with precision that we struggle to match even today. It is exactly the right size to resonate sound and shows no signs of ever containing a body. Above this chamber, there are 5 granite relief chambers stacked in layers. Officially, they were built to reduce pressure, but they could also have an acoustic function, enhancing vibratory resonance, similar to how sound waves are amplified in a musical instrument. Dunn's theory continues. The Queen's Chamber, which has peculiar ducts that lead nowhere, may once have contained chemical components. The idea is that 2 substances were mixed inside the chamber, producing hydrogen gas, which then flowed through the ducts into the king's chamber. They are combined with the vibratory energy harness from the earth and the quartz-rich granite. The result was a stable and autonomous hydrogen power plant, capable of generating usable energy long before the concept of electricity existed. Perhaps it sounds too far-fetched, but the evidence doesn't stop there. At the base of the pyramid, near the entrance, there are signs of intense heat damage on some stones, a discoloration that has not yet been explained. Nearby, evidence of acoustic resonance has been recorded in the underground chamber, where sensitive microphones have picked up low-frequency vibrations that still emanate through rock. Even the alignment of the Great Pyramid is incredibly precise. It is oriented almost perfectly to true north, more precisely than most modern buildings. It is aligned with the cardinal points and located at the intersection of the longest lines of latitude and longitude, essentially the center of the landmass. How could a society without compasses or satellites achieve such precision? The deeper you go, the more you feel that we are missing something. Not only about the pyramid, but about the people who built it. Were the ancient Egyptians heirs to a much older and technologically gifted civilization? Did they understand physics, vibration, and energy in ways that we have forgotten? Conventional Egyptologists scoff at these suggestions. They point to the lack of wiring, batteries, or other technological remains. But the counterargument is simple. What if their technology was not based on cables and circuits? And what if it was based on acoustic geometry, vibration, and natural materials? A type of technology that leaves no trace as we are used to seeing in it. When Christopher Dunn visited the pyramid with modern tools, he found machining marks on the stone surfaces that suggested precision saws, possibly of an ultrasonic nature. He observed that the flatness of granite blocks inside the king's chamber exceeded modern industrial tolerances. To be clear, Dunn never claimed aliens built the pyramids. He believed that humans did it, but humans with knowledge we no longer possess. A lost civilization, one that knew how to turn Earth's energy into something practical and hid it in plain sight within the world's most iconic monument. As you lie back and listen, imagine the pyramid not as a lifeless tomb, but as a buzzing machine, a monolithic engine powered by the Earth's rhythm, glowing softly from within, channeling currents through stone and gas, vibrating in harmony with the cosmos. And then ask yourself, why did we stop building them? Why haven't we found any record of how they were built? And why, after centuries of study, do we still know so little? For most, the Great Pyramid is an impressive enigma, an architectural marvel built with primitive tools and guided only by determination and clever engineering. But for others, it is a machine, a testament to science that we no longer understand. And if Christopher Dunn's theory about the Giza power plant is even partially correct, the implications are staggering. We're not just talking about a lost technology, but a lost worldview in which energy, architecture, and nature were intertwined into a single seamless system. And if that knowledge really existed, who hid it? Why do we not know it? Let's start with one of the most controversial aspects, the suppression of evidence. Over the decades, several researchers and explorers have claimed that anomalous findings inside the pyramid have been ignored, misrepresented, or outright dismissed. One of the most persistent claims focuses on the missing cornerstone. The Great Pyramid, as it stands today, ends in a flat platform, but ancient writings and early illustrations suggest that it once had a cornerstone made of electrum, a natural alloy of gold and silver. Electrum is not only rare and beautiful, but also highly conductive. If the pyramid functioned as a resonant energy device, the presence of such a material at its apex could have acted as the terminal point of a conductor, similar to the tip of a lightning rod attracting electricity from the sky. But that cornerstone has disappeared, and no clear explanation has ever been given as to where it went or why it was removed. Could it have been destroyed to hide the pyramid's original function? Or was it removed by those who wanted to keep the secret buried? Then there is the question of the so-called air shafts. Originally dismissed as ventilation ducts, these narrow passages that start from the chambers of the kings and queens do not connect to the outside in any way that facilitates airflow. Even more intriguing, they appear aligned with specific celestial bodies, such as the Orion Belt and Sirius. Some researchers have suggested that these ducts could have been part of a frequency tuning system, possibly used to resonate or direct energy. But when robotic explorers equipped with cameras and sensors were sent into these ducts in recent years, what they found only added to the mystery. In one of the ducts, a limestone door with metal fittings was discovered. Behind it, another stone door. The Egyptian authorities offered no explanation as to what lay beyond. When a second robot was deployed, it was inexplicably blocked and unable to continue, and the explorations were quietly suspended. Many believe that what lies behind those stone doors could reveal the true function of the pyramid, a secret hidden from the world. Let's now turn to engineering anomalies, features of the pyramid that appear to defy Bronze Age technology. Let's look at the precision of the internal chambers. The walls of the king's chamber are not only perfectly flat, but aligned with millimeter precision over long distances. The joints between the stones are so tight that not even a razor blade can fit between them. The level of polishing of some surfaces has been compared to that produced by modern diamond tools. And let's consider the tool marks. Dunn and other researchers have pointed to spiral grooves and holes in the granite that resemble those made by modern high-speed drills. In some cases, the grooves are deeper than copper tools, supposedly the only ones available to the builders, could have achieved. If these are the marks of power tools, who is handling them? And where are those tools? Now, one of the most disturbing components of the theory lies in the idea that the pyramid was not just a matter of power. It was about resonance with Earth itself. Some geologists believe that the entire Giza Plateau lies on an active natural fault capable of producing harmonic vibrations. Could the pyramid have been built to exploit this vibration? Was it tuned like a huge quartz instrument to vibrate at the same frequency as the planet? The idea seems fantastic, but it reflects recent studies on how certain frequencies can affect water molecules, human brainwaves, and even the structural integrity of materials. The king's chamber, as mentioned, is built with pink granite, rich in quartz minerals. These materials are not only piezoelectric, but also used in modern acoustic equipment, such as microphones and tuning forks. Let us imagine that the chamber was not intended for a sarcophagus, but for a sound bath, a place where energy converged, where hydrogen gas and vibration met in a literal storm of frequencies. Now, why was such an advanced system erased from historical records? Some believe that the pyramid was never intended for us, that it is the relic of a civilization preceding the dynastic Egyptians by thousands of years, perhaps even survivors of a forgotten cataclysm. The Egyptians could simply have inherited what was left, incorporating it into their religious practices and rituals without fully understanding its purpose. Others suggest that the suppression is more modern, that the colonial powers and the first Egyptologists, eager to maintain their narratives of linear progress, ignored everything that did not fit the mold, that the idea of energy generation in antiquity, of civilizations more advanced than ours, was simply too threatening to the prevailing worldview. There are even rumors of intelligence agencies and secret projects and military interest in pyramid energy, scalar waves, and terrestrial resonance. Although these claims are more difficult to verify, they add another layer to the veil of mystery that surrounds the Giza Plateau. Ultimately, the Giza power plant theory forces us to ask uncomfortable questions, not only about history, but about ourselves. If an ancient civilization mastered energy in ways we have not yet rediscovered, what does that say about the story that we have been telling? And if the Great Pyramid is just a node in a forgotten global energy network, with other monuments like Teotihuacan, Baalbek, and Angkor what being part of the same network, then perhaps we have only scratched the surface. As you delve into the stillness of night, imagine the desert wind howling through the centuries. Imagine the Great Pyramid once more, not as a tomb, but as a beacon, a pulsating machine that once illuminated the earth, humming in harmony with the stars and waiting for someone to remember its true purpose. And perhaps that someone is us. Far below the breaking waves off the East China Sea, near the southern coast of the Japanese island of Yonaguni, lies a structure defying our understanding of ancient history. A site so vast, so angular, and so improbable that it has been compared to the lost city of Atlantis itself. It was not discovered by archaeologists, nor revealed through a major excavation. It was found by chance by a diver, and since then, it has been pulling at the threads of our shared history, unraveling something we may not be ready to face. The year was 1986. Hihiro Arataki, a local diver and tour operator, was exploring the seabed in the hope of finding new places for tourists when he noticed something strange in the depths. At first glance, it looked like a huge rock formation, but as he got closer, his breath was taken away. The structure below him was huge, over 150 m long and almost 25 m high. But it wasn't just its size that surprised him. It was its geometry. Right angles, perfect steps, flat platforms, sharp corners, and long, straight corridors seemed to invite the curious to venture into the sea. They were not typical characteristics of nature. They were too clean and symmetrical, almost as if someone had sculpted the ocean floor in the likeness of an ancient temple. As the news spread, geologists and archaeologists flocked to Yonaguni to see it with their own eyes. The initial reaction was one of caution. Most assumed it was a trick of erosion, natural rock worn away by time and bound into a shape that simply resembled a human design. But others were not so sure. The main believer was Professor Masaki Kimura from the University of Ryukyus. Kimura, a marine geologist with decades of experience, spent more than 15 years diving at the site, mapping its features and documenting its anomalies. His conclusion was astonishing. The Yonaguni monument was not a natural formation. It was a vestige of an ancient, submerged city, probably built more than 10,000 years ago, thousands of years before the oldest known Japanese civilization. And that was not all. Kimura claimed to have found roads, stairs, columns, and even what appeared to be a pyramid in a stadium-like structure. The existence of stone engravings, some of which are believed to resemble ancient writing, was reported on some of the walls. Other divers observed large stone gates and megalithic arrangements, suggesting a religious significance. If Kimura was right, the Yonaguni monument defied history, but shattered it. Because at the time this monument would have been built, the area that is now submerged was part of a landmass that connected what is now Japan with the Asian continent. But then came the last ice age and the rise in sea level, which engulfed coasts around the world. Yonaguni, like many other ancient sites possibly hidden beneath the waves, became a victim of time, raising profound questions. What else have we lost under the oceans? For skeptics, the argument remains that Yonaguni is nothing more than a rare, natural geological formation, a type of sandstone platform fractured by tectonic activity and sculpted by ocean currents. But even this theory struggles to explain certain characteristics of the site. For example, there is the so-called terrace, a large flat area surrounded by almost perfect walls with 90 degrees angles, which resembles a platform or amphitheater. Or the twin pillars, two huge vertical stones placed with such precision that they seem to mark an entrance. Then there's the face, a carved profile that bears an unsettling resemblance to a human figure, with eyes, nose, and mouth. Nature can do many things, but can it sculpt a human face on such a large scale? And this is where the mystery starts to extend beyond geology. Because if Yonaguni was really built by man, then it predates not only Japanese civilization, but all known civilizations on Earth. The structure would have been above sea level more than 10,000 years ago, a time when According to conventional archaeology, human beings were just beginning to settle into agricultural communities. How then could such an ancient people, without iron tools, without writing, without advanced engineering, have built a monument of such scale and complexity? Unless, of course, we are missing an entire chapter from our past. Some believe that Yonaguni could be a vestige of the legendary Mu, a sunken continent said to have existed in the Pacific and often compared to Atlantis. Others suggest that it is proof of a forgotten maritime civilization, capable of traveling by sea and building monuments long before the rise of Sumer or Egypt. And others go further and whisper about knowledge transmitted from the stars or by survivors of a lost era, beings who knew secrets that we can no longer understand. Whatever its origin, the Yonaguni monument stands silently beneath the waves, undisturbed by the passage of time, but throbbing with a silent challenge to the narrative we have built around us. It challenges us to look again, to dive deeper, not only into the sea, but into our own assumptions. Next, we will explore even more the mysteries surrounding Yonaguni, the cultural taboos, the global connections, the theories that conventional academia does not dare to touch, and the legacy that this monument may have for future generations. For now, as the waves whisper secrets about the ancient stones, let yourself be carried away by the silence, the wonder, and the depths. If the Yonaguni monument is truly a vestige of a lost civilization, then it is more than just a relic. It is a message in stone that resonates across millennia, inviting us to remember something we have long forgotten. But the monument not only challenges history, it divides it. Because while Professor Masaki Kimura and an increasing number of independent researchers defend its artificial origin, the academic community remains largely silent or dismissive. Why? Is it simply skepticism, the need for more evidence? Or is it something deeper? A resistance to rewriting a story that has already been etched on the walls of our museums, classrooms, and consciousness. In academic circles, reputation is based on consistency and peer-reviewed certainty. To propose that Yonaguni is an artificial structure 10,000 years old would not only contradict the accepted archaeological chronology, but would call into question everything built upon it. The emergence of civilization, the development of technology, the nature of early human societies. Everything would have to be re-examined. Thus, Yonaguni remains trapped in a liminal space, too strange to be natural, too radical to be accepted. But the rumors persist because there are parallels, subtle but undeniable, between Yonaguni and other megalithic sites scattered around the world. Some have drawn comparisons with the megalithic constructions found in Peru, where the Inca and pre-Inca civilizations left polygonal walls so perfectly fitted that not even a blade of grass can slip between the stones. Others see echoes of Göbekli Tepe, a Turkish site dating back more than 11,000 years that redefined our understanding of how early humans organized religion, art, and architecture. Could these sites, separated by oceans and eras, be the traces of a forgotten global culture, scattered and submerged by rising sea levels, remembered only in myths? Even more mysterious are the claims that similar submerged structures may exist throughout the Pacific. In the Gulf of Cambat, in India, sonar scanners have revealed underwater ruins buried under silt. Off the coast of Cuba, deep-sea divers stumbled upon what some have described as symmetrical formations and pyramidal shapes. They are so deep that they would date back to a time when the area was above sea level, more than 10,000 years ago. And this brings us back to Yonaguni. If such structures exist on several continents, all with common characteristics such as megalithic precision, astronomical alignment, and deliberate geometry, then perhaps Yonaguni is not an isolated case. Perhaps it is a clue, the first thread of a tapestry that, if pulled, could reveal an entire lost chapter of human history. But the monument has more implications than just archaeological ones. It touches something primitive within us, a sense of wonder, of displacement, of memory. For centuries, Cultures all over the world have told stories of great floods and lost lands. From Plato's Atlantis to the biblical flood, from Mesopotamian myths to Polynesian legends, the theme is disturbingly consistent. A great civilization destroyed by rising sea levels. Is it all just myth? Or were these accounts oral echoes of real events transmitted, transformed, and hidden in the language of gods and symbols? What if Yonaguni, lying silently beneath the sea, is a tangible vestige of one of these stories? The local legends of Okinawa and the Ryukyu Islands speak of a time when giants walked the earth, gods built gigantic structures, and the sea was not where it is now. The Ainu people of Japan, an ancient indigenous group, have accounts of powerful beings and ancestral knowledge transmitted by their ancestors long before history was recorded. Professor Camera has even pointed out that local fishermen formerly referred to the underwater site as Isiki Point, which roughly translates to ruins or remains. Was this more than just coincidence? And yet, despite its potential, Yonaguni has received little official funding or research from the global archaeological community. There have been no large-scale underwater excavations, no carbon dating of the artifacts, nor detailed sonar mappings to the level that the site merits. Why this silence? Some suggest it is for political reasons. Others say it is out of fear. Fear of what the truth might mean. Because if the monument was sculpted by intelligent hands, it forces us to ask ourselves, who were they? Where did they go? And what did they know that we have forgotten? There are even those who propose that the monument may not be of entirely human origin, that it could represent knowledge shared or witnessed by a more advanced intelligence. Although these ideas border on the fringe, the mystery of Yonaguni seems to invite speculation. Because when we are faced with something that defies all explanation, the human mind strives to make sense of it, even if it is beyond the horizon of accepted truth. In the end, whether Yonaguni is the Atlantis of the Pacific, a geological wonder, or a message from the ancients lost to time, one thing is certain. It invites us to look more deeply into our oceans, into our myths, and into ourselves. It reminds us that the history of humanity may be much older, stranger, and more wonderful than we have been taught. And somewhere beneath the surface, in the dark blue silence of the depths, the monument waits, motionless, immutable, whispering its truth to those willing to listen. Now let the weight of the sea rest upon your thoughts. Close your eyes. Imagine those vast stone terraces that extend beneath you. Imagine the questions they raise. Upon emerging from the tranquil depths of these forgotten places, a strange stillness is felt. The kind of stillness that does not settle after finding an answer, but after asking the right questions. Because this journey has never been just about ancient artifacts, peculiar stones, or mysterious monuments. It was about something far deeper. The limits of our collective memory. The delicate thread that connects us to our remote past. And how easily that thread can fray under the pressure of modern certainty. Throughout this documentary, we have traversed ruins engulfed by sand and sea. We have questioned machines built millennia before they should have existed. We have followed the trail of giants. We have heard the hum of forgotten energy sources, and we have heard the silent warnings of civilizations reduced to myths. Each of these forbidden discoveries hold a truth. Not necessarily of the type that can be measured or classified, but of the type that endures like a voice half heard in a dream, or a symbol we feel before understanding it. A truth that says we do not know everything, that our history, as we have written, it is only one version, a safe version. But what if the true history of humanity is stranger, older, and far more magnificent than we have dared to imagine? There is some security in linear history, in knowing that civilization began in Mesopotamia, that progress was slow but logical, and that we now live at the peak of that ascent. But these anomalies, these secrets buried in caves, deserts, and ocean floors, whisper a different story. A story of civilizations that rose and fell before ours, of knowledge acquired and lost, of cycles too long to see in a single lifetime. And perhaps it is why these discoveries are ignored, minimized, or even hidden. Not because they are deceptions or misinterpretations, but because they do not fit into the story we have chosen to believe. However, the evidence is still there. Not in conspiracies, but in stone. Not in headlines, but in silence. Each artifact we have explored is a key. Rusty, worn, perhaps even broken, but still a key. A key that, when inserted into the correct lock, can open a door whose existence we had forgotten. A door to ourselves. Because, after all, the search for our ancestral truth is not just an archaeological search. It's a spiritual search. To remember what we were. To glimpse what we could be again. And ask ourselves in silence, yet with courage, what else have we forgotten? What else have we lost? So, as you immerse yourselves in the silence of a dream, let these questions be with you. Let your dreams transport you to deserts where giants once walked, to pyramids that pulse with an unknown power, to stone cities lost under the waves. Let your mind wander beyond the borders of history and delve into the shadows of what came before. And when you wake, let a part of you remain curious, uncertain, even uncomfortable, because that is where wonder resides, in the space between knowing and not knowing. It has been 2 hours of forbidden archaeological discoveries that were kept secret, a documentary not only about the past, but about the mystery of being human, of being part of a story still unfolding. Thank you for listening, and remember, never stop searching.